WordPress has matured and the offerings within the WordPress ecosystem have matured to the extent that now enterprise organizations, IT teams, can take on with confidence WordPress into their ecosystem.
Hi, I'm Monica Carvata. I'm your host today for Velocitize Talks, and I'm so happy to be here with Sean Blakeley. He's a WordPress Technical Director at AmericanEagle.com. AmericanEagle.com is a fabulous agency, family-run business, and we love working with you, love your expertise. And you, Sean, have an amazing background. I think I heard that you may have built your first website 25 years ago.
25 years ago, crikey. I think you're right. I think in the late 90s, yeah, that's about right.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Come a long way.
It has a wee bit, I think that was it Flash and HTML, all sorts of technologies that I was using back then.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a long time ago.
So, Sean, when did you join American Eagle?
So I joined American Eagle just over 2 years ago.
Wonderful. Amazing. Maybe for the benefit of those who aren't familiar with your agency, maybe just share a bit about the unique value proposition and your specialty and what you offer to your clients.
Yes, so American Eagle is a huge agency. It's 800 strong, fully international, and it's unusual in the sense that it's platform agnostic. It's very common that you have a large ecosystem within an enterprise organization. You may have a Sitecore instance, maybe you've got some WordPress marketing sites that you're also sort of owning in your ecosystem, and maybe other platforms as well. And the beauty of American Eagle and the sort of scale that we are is that we can support across that entire ecosystem. So it really is a true partnership rather than kind of scattered vendors is our sort of proposition to enterprise.
That is fantastic. We do also see the trend of multiple CMS adoption in the enterprise. Because you have different use cases that require one or the other, or you have something proprietary that you're not ready to completely overhaul, right?
I think you're exactly right. And I think, part of the journey that WordPress has been on is being that kind of secondary or even tertiary kind of CMS, often the championed by the marketing team. So, that kind of shallow learning curve, that flexibility is how they've kind of, WordPress has come into their ecosystem. But then, of course, they've got champions internally that they're finding they can achieve so much with WordPress, and it's taking on greater importance in this agency, in these organizations. And then when they come to re-platform, every that kind of 8 to 10 year cycle, well, WordPress is in that consideration mix, and that simply wasn't the case 5 or 6 years ago.
Because they've gotten exposure in smaller use cases.
Exactly that, but it's got legitimacy. And so I think, probably everyone within the WordPress space, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we were often talking about, well, WordPress is just a blogging platform, isn't it? Or WordPress is insecure, isn't it? And these were things that, almost every client meeting or sales meeting, we'd be having to talk about these things and sort of, fighting a rear guard in terms of justifying WordPress at this kind of scale, a larger scale. Those conversations aren't happening anymore.
Wow.
CTOs in these larger organizations, through their own exposure to WordPress as part of their ecosystem, have now validated their concern, have addressed those concerns, and particularly with a partner like WP Engine, where we've got, we're taking away those concerns about security.
Yeah.
Exactly, those pillars of excellence for architecture, things about scalability, things about performance, things about the stability of
that you have to have.
Exactly
right.
that,
Yeah.
and so things that keep CTOs awake at night, that they sort of concern themselves.
Right.
Well, those concerns have been taken away, that now, WordPress has matured and the offerings within the WordPress ecosystem have matured to the extent that now enterprise organizations, IT teams can take on with confidence WordPress into their ecosystem. So it's an extraordinary part of the WordPress journey.
I know that you all recently had a big migration success story with John Bean Technologies, and this involved like WordPress as the main platform and helping make the transition from Sitecore. Can you speak to that, and what was the use case that took you to making that recommendation, and maybe in general, why would you recommend moving to WordPress as the primary?
So that was an interesting one, because it kind of resonates with something that we were talking about a moment ago, which is that kind of changes in the Sitecore ecosystem, but also the considerations that, are we utilizing all of the tools that our technology offers? And so Sitecore has a big personalization component, and personalization is a big undertaking. It's a big maintenance piece. There's a big commitment in terms of the organization, and JBT is a great example of an organization that simply weren't utilizing that, even though they were, the investment was made, but they weren't utilizing that part of the technology. Where they were hesitant, and so it was, they really needed to understand what WordPress had to offer, was around publishing flows. So they had a very particular workflow. They have an international team of content creators across many different brand instances and many different languages as well. And they had very particular approval flows and very particular sort of editorial flows that they needed to try and replicate, the kind of governance of the site, if you will. Yeah. And so, what we did with them was show them that, yes, of course, WordPress can do that, and down to the granular kind of categories. Certain categories were owned by certain international teams, but not others. And so there was really this complex web of permissions, exactly as you say, across the international team. And it was a hugely successful project because at every turn, WordPress was able not just to fulfill where they were yesterday in terms of their Sitecore instance, but to improve where they were. And so what they found as we took them on this journey with the sort of replatforming to WordPress was that the goal wasn't just to build what they had before, that actually they could build in all these improvements because they could utilize WordPress, they could leverage what WordPress had to offer. And so it was a really exciting exploratory project as they began to realize how empowering WordPress was as a platform and how much they could achieve, the flexibility that they had at their disposal now where they'd replatform from Sitecore. And so it was a great project for that. And also, as WordPress technologists, just to reawaken just the distance that we have come as a platform, as a community, and the fact that we have people now replatforming, large organizations replatforming from Sitecore, and they can't believe what WordPress has to offer and what in the right hands can be achieved with WordPress at this scale.
That is a great story. It's just a really great story. In the vein of wow, look at what's happening. There's so much possibility. WordPress initially set that up with the REST API. You can literally do anything, your choice, and you only pay for what you want. I would love to have you share your thoughts on the new headless trend, and maybe for viewers who are less familiar, just a little bit of here's how to think about it and what you're seeing with your clients. Anything innovative, exciting, and how you're seeing it being leveraged.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
I know.
So where to start? For those that maybe aren't so aware, headless is where we utilize WordPress as what we sometimes call the data center. So this is our kind of processing of information, the content creation, if you like. But then we're pulling that rather than into the kind of templates within WordPress. So these would be, in the past, sort of PHP templates. In more recent times would be kind of block-based themes, but still controlled within WordPress. Well, what we do is we kind of remove that front end. We're just pulling in the data, so that might be via the REST API, it might be via something called GraphQL, but we're pulling that data into a separate application. And this is the kind of headless piece. So if we imagine that the data center WordPress is the body, well, our application is is our new head of our architecture. Yep. And so this is a dedicated application. Now, the benefits of that are that the performance is extraordinary. We can, and maybe we'll talk about another project in a second where, that you can achieve extraordinary performance on huge scale projects because you've got this custom dedicated application that's written specifically for the needs for your needs, for your data needs. And so the overheads are very small. But also the developer experience is excellent. The developers get to work with React and Next.js and other sort of technologies, and they get to explore integrations with things like Algolia and other sort of services as well. So it's incredibly powerful in the right hands, but it also comes at a cost. And that cost isn't just commercial. The cost is that you've got new technology. You've got a huge number of new dependencies within your stack. We mentioned a moment ago about sort of customization, and whilst that's very powerful, that's also a consideration within you and your team, both your agency and your organisation.
What talent do you have to maintain?
Well, exactly that. What other skills do you need to bring in? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, like they are high maintenance projects. So as you put them into a kind of maintenance cycle, one of the joys of WordPress is that it's very low maintenance. If you have just a presentation site and you've gone through your sort of production cycle, well then you can maintain it with relatively small amounts of effort, and SLA coverage. That's not true in headless. You have something like Next.js 13 has just arrived. Like that's a paradigm shift that you're going to have to respond to if you have a headless implementation. Yeah. So there are considerations throughout the life cycle of the project, and when you're thinking about the successful delivery being not just that exciting period when we're doing the project and we've got 5 developers and 2 a Scrum Master and all the exciting things are going, but that much longer period when it's maybe less exciting.
After you've launched and you have to keep it good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's still not a reason not to explore this technology and find it as the right fit. But I think it's more being aware of the impact, the consequences of making these decisions.
So speaking of headless and performance and the impact that it can make, I know that you have a recent great client story on that front. Maybe you can't mention the name, but could share a little bit about what they achieved?
Yeah, so this is about to go live. It's been an extraordinary project, probably the best part of a year, even more in strategy in terms of sort of understanding what we're trying to achieve. It's for an auction site, so there's a huge number of moving parts. We are working with more than 250,000 data points. So this is on a scale that's seldom seen in terms of this kind of technology stack. So all sorts of considerations at that kind of scale when you start to fully utilize what headless has to offer and really sort of choosing the right aspects of headless technology for the right needs. Yeah, it's a fascinating project and
fascinating.
Taking on those challenges at that scale and the fact that WordPress is in that mix, and WordPress is really it's the beating heart of that architecture. It's the engine. It's ingesting data from Salesforce. It's then parsing, manipulating that data, pushing it into a front-end application. It's extraordinary that WordPress is now such a critical part of an architecture that's as vast as that.
Very fun job. I wonder for viewers that are watching us today, if you had some advice for marketers on what, in today's era that we're in right now, what you would advise prioritizing as an investment?
So for me, AI is clearly the area that if I were to have the purse strings for the marketing budget, I wouldn't hesitate to be investing in. AI is going to impact on your business, and so you've got a decision to either get out in front of it and drive that, or be passive and have it impact you in ways that you won't necessarily be able to predict. And if I were a marketer, that's undoubtedly where I would put my investments and my efforts and energies. I would really focus on that area.
So I guess just to close out for today, I would love just to hear, maybe for you personally or AmericanEagle.com or a combination, what's really inspiring to you right now and has you excited?
So I think, AI is like we know as technologists, like this is beginning to come into our sphere and in unpredictable ways. We don't know how this is going to, how we're going to be interacting with this just yet. But that's extraordinarily exciting. And I think we've touched on some of the things around headless. We've talked about Gutenberg to an extent. And I think there's a coming together of these technologies. One area that we're currently looking at is trying to improve Gutenberg into headless. So that true, and for us, that's the gold standard, where you have a world-class content creation experience. So we were talking earlier about those internal stakeholders. Marketers have the very best experience they can in terms of that WYSIWYG editor within Gutenberg. But the developers also have the most extraordinary technology that they can work with at their disposal in terms of headless or React application. To me, that's the gold standard. If you can bring those two worlds together and achieve that, and then if we bring AI into that mix in terms of the adoption of new technologies as well, what an extraordinary journey we're about to go on, aren't we? It's been good so far, but to me, that's what gets me excited.
Yeah.
And I can see it coming.
It's actually just right around the corner.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I really have enjoyed our talk. Again, this is Monica Carvata, Velocitize Talks, and we're here today with Sean Blakeley of AmericanEagle.com. Thanks for being with us.